The Capital Confidential podcast is brought to you by the Times-Union, the leading newspaper in New York's capital region. Subscribe today or visit online at timesunion.com.
Oh, great. Where in Colorado?
Denver and Boulder. The governor has sent me out there as part of the marijuana listening tour. It was originally just going to be me and Howard Zucker, but whatever.
You want to deport an undocumented person? Start with me, because I'm an undocumented person.
How do we beat him in an election?
We will. I'm going to run against him.
I wish you would. Dad. I would.
There are things in here that are unobjectionable because they're not that effective. So yeah, sure, I'll vote for a distinctive license plate. Sure, why not?
Jim, you had your press conference at 4 o'clock.
You're having a press conference now?
That's
You're
right.
talking?
I'm having a press conference.
Well,
now.
is this your space here or is it public?
No, it's my space.
Oh, this is your
Don't
space.
interrupt.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Capital Confidential podcast. I'm David Lombardo. This episode features a conversation with four-term Senator David Carlucci, a Rockland County Democrat and one of the two former Senate IDC members to survive the primary night purges that saw 6 former members go down in defeat. Our conversation examines the formation of the Independent Democratic Conference in 2010, its dissolution in April, and rejoining the Democratic Conference. Senator Carlucci also shared advice for the new class of millennial senators and talked about how Democratic control of the chamber in 2019 might look different from 10 years ago. Enjoy the show. I guess the first thing that I'm just curious about is, back in 2010, at the ripe old age of 29, 2 years younger than I am now, how did the idea of an independent conference come up, and what made it feel like the right fit for you and your district?
2010, it was a totally different environment than it is now. And as you probably remember, it was not a good year for Democrats. I was the first Democrat to be elected to this Senate district. And at that time, we were coming off of just absolute dysfunction in the state Senate. We were the laughingstock of the nation. And I ran on a platform of, look, I'm a Democrat. I believe in democratic principles. However, we've got to put our residents first. And the idea that we've got to work together to get results. And that's been my commitment from day one. But before I got elected to the Senate, I was a town clerk and beat a Republican that was there for 30 years and said, look, we've got to focus on ideas and not just politics. And that's really how this idea came up, to say, how can we forge ahead in an environment where hyperpartisan is continuing to increase, and try to forge a path forward to say, look, we'll work with Democrats, we'll work with Republicans to get results. And that's really how it started.
And the Republicans did have a numerical majority in 2011, 2012. And were there, legislation that you feel was able to get through because of that partnership, despite the Democrats being outnumbered? I mean, it seems to me like marriage equality probably benefited from the IDC, as well as a strong push from Governor Cuomo.
Of course. The idea was that, look, we knew that to get real progressive, meaningful legislation, we needed some Republican votes to make that happen. And that was evident with marriage equality. Then you fast forward with the SAFE Act, the most comprehensive gun control legislation in the nation. All of that was done with Democrats and Republicans. And if you remember back then, we didn't have a unified Democratic conference in regards to, we didn't have all Democrats supporting marriage equality.
Right.
And so I think that's something that we often forget. I understand the environment today, and many people have just been absolutely enraged by what's going on in Washington with the policies and the rhetoric coming from President Trump, and want to push back any way possible. So I understand and I get that. And that's why times have changed, the environment has changed, and why the IDC doesn't exist anymore. A big reason why I think my colleagues lost their primaries was because there's this anger, and it got linked to working with Republicans and got, I think, misguided information about many of us supporting Republican issues, which is just absolutely not true. But, hey, the elections, people spoke. It's a new day. I'm a Democrat, and I'm focused on Democratic unity because I believe now more than ever. Democrats, we're a big tent. there's more that unites us than divides us. And if we're not united, then Trump is going to have his way, and we can't allow that. I mean, the policies coming out of Washington are just disastrous to New Yorkers and disastrous to the Hudson Valley. And it's something that I think we've got to educate people on. I mean, this SALT bill, the tax bill that came out of President Trump's administration, that's a $14 billion hit to New York. That's an increase in property taxes, an increase in taxes to New Yorkers. And it's something that I don't think has resonated yet with the people of New York State. I don't think most people understand what this means to our bottom line.
Well, why do you say it's an increase in property taxes when in reality all it is an increase of your federal taxes? I mean, no one's property tax bill is going to change. It's just what you can deduct on your federal taxes is going to change.
Well, in essence, that we've been able to write off the full amount of our property taxes,
right?
And that's what I'm saying. And now you're not going to be able to do that. So it's an increase in taxes overall. So yes, we've responded. A piece of legislation that I drafted right away was to allow us to decouple from the Department of Taxation and Finance from the IRS to allow New Yorkers to still write off the full amount of their property taxes against their New York State income taxes. I mean, there's a whole slew of issues, but some of the issues that really hit us here in the Hudson Valley, one of the things that President Trump has done is he said he wants to end temporary protective status on July 22nd of 2019. And for us here in Rockland County, we have one of the largest Haitian American populations, not only in the state of New York, but in the entire country. And it's something that we're extremely proud of. We have over 5,000 people here in New York State that are here from Haiti under temporary protective status. There's reports that say that they've contributed $260 million annually to New York State's GDP. They're paying taxes. They're documented. But yet now President Trump wants to send them back to Haiti, where Haiti is not ready for them. And it's a humanitarian problem, but it's also an economic problem. So I mentioned those two issues about the SALT and TPS because I think it's things that people hear, but we really have to explain to people what it means to us locally, what it means in our community.
So you talked a little bit about what the Democratic control of the Senate was like in 2009, 2010, and Republicans, including your opponent, have painted a bleak, post-apocalyptic landscape, basically, of what Democratic control might look like in 2019. So how do you quell those concerns about what a Democratic majority might be like in the Senate for 2019?
Well, I think the climate has changed. The environment has changed. You look at the lawmakers that were there in 2009. Now it's 10 years later. It's amazing to think that time flies. But the makeup of the Senate has changed, and I think people have learned many of the lessons. I think Andrea Stewart-Cousins is going to be a fantastic majority leader. I think she's someone that listens and takes the concerns of the conference forward. And more importantly for me, she's a suburban lawmaker. Our districts connect, are right next to each other,
right.
And we're neighboring districts. We share the Tappan Zee Bridge. So she gets the suburban issues, and that's something for a long time that has been a divide, that unfortunately the Democratic Conference was labeled as just supporting city interests. I think that's changed. I think the Democratic Conference today and when we're in the majority and we pick up some members throughout the Hudson Valley and upstate and in Long Island, that it's more representative of New York State in a whole. And we're a big tent, and I think it's important that we push those issues going forward. We've got to make sure that we're addressing not just one part of the state, but the entire state. And a big need is suburban issues.
Well, you mentioned the big tent, and right now standing outside that tent is Simca Felder, who doesn't align with the Democratic Party on a lot of social issues. For example, when I say the Senate Democratic Party on a lot of social issues, would you like to see him rejoin the fold? Is there room in the tent for him still?
I mean, there could be. I mean, let's see what happens after the election. If Senator Felder is going to be a team player and work with the Democrats and support our agenda, then I don't see why not. But if it's not going to be working to support the causes that we believe in, then it's not going to work.
You don't think there's room for him to vote against the caucus in certain ways, similar to how Ruben Diaz might have done, or other members who maybe voted against like marriage equality in 2009, the first time it came up?
Well, I'm hopeful that we have a majority where, yes, if you have some defecting votes, it doesn't kill a bill, and then that would be acceptable. But it's hard to say. I haven't seen anything that shows that Senator Felder would want to be with the Democratic Conference or is willing to do that. I haven't talked to him about that anytime recently, and that'll be a conversation that Leader Stuart Cousins will have with him and have with other members to see, hey, are you going to be a team player? Are you going to be united with us? And that's what we need to see. But obviously, a lot of that will be predicated on the election results on November 6th.
So, assuming Democrats take majority in 2019 in the state Senate, what would your pitch be to more moderate Republicans in the state Senate, the Joe Robachs, the Elaine Phillips, if they win as well, to say, hey, this is what we did in 2011, 2012 to help make some of our policies work. We found common ground. Would you recommend they form their independent Republican conference? How do you work with some of those more moderate members in 2019 if you are in the majority? And do you think they should have their own conference or something like that?
Well, I think that we just have to keep an open dialogue. I think it's so important that we do not allow the rhetoric that we see on cable TV and the rhetoric coming out of Congress in Washington to corrupt us in Albany. But at the end of the day, we still have to have a process where we can hash out ideas, negotiate legislation, work together to move it forward. And that's been an experience that I've seen. In the New York State Senate, it hasn't been easy because it is such a narrowly divided chamber. The Assembly has the luxury of having a supermajority of Democrats.
Right.
They don't need to talk to the other party. In the New York State Senate, we've had to do that. Does it look messy at times? Is it frustrating to some people? Absolutely. However, when you get to the bottom line and you say, hey, I'm working with residents in my community that are suffering and they need this bill to pass, we've got to get it done. And we that's the bottom line. We've got to get it done. And that I feel like that's my job to do. And I think that we've got to continue to foster a relationship where, hey, we might disagree, but where can we agree? There's a possibility that it's a slim majority, and that's going to mean that we're going to need to have Republican votes at times to pass certain legislation. And that's something that we've got to be mindful of to say, hey, we've got to keep those lines of communication open.
So there's the potential that there's going to be a new class of millennial senators in Albany in 2019. And as someone who joined the chamber at 29 years old, what advice would you have for these new members in terms of, working with more senior colleagues and also just surviving Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights in Albany?
Well, I think it's where you really have to pay attention, absorb it, and figure out how legislation moves forward, how you navigate through the budget process. It is a big learning curve, and it's something that I've taken very seriously. And I think from what I've met some of the people that have won the primaries and will be joining us in Albany, and they seem like they're ready to roll up their sleeves and get to work and be serious about the issues in their community and helping the entire state. So I think if you have that, you've got to have the passion, you've got to have the drive, you've got to have the meetings with some of the staffers that have been there for a long time, and really pay attention. Read the rules of the Senate, read up on parliamentary procedure, get to know how the budget works in regards to the executive proposes it in January, how the conference committees work. It is a big learning curve, but you realize, hey, a lot of stuff gets done in the budget. One of the things that I found to be very successful is that you've got to have a plan. That if you don't have a plan, you fall into someone else's. And I've always been one to say, hey, you've got to be ready for when the opportunity comes. I've drafted legislation and I thought it was the best idea in the world, but other people weren't ready for it, and the community wasn't ready for it. And then 2 years goes by and it was, oh, wow, why didn't we come up with this earlier? It's like, oh, well, we did have it. But my point is that you've got to be pushing the agenda that is appropriate for your community, and you've got to be prepared for when the opportunity comes that you have the plan and you're ready to go. Too often, unfortunately, around the country and even in New York State, you see where legislators just sit back and react. They're not proactive, and that's a real shame. That's one of the things I admire about our governor. You know, some people criticize the governor. I don't agree with him on everything, but he's been very proactive. He's said, hey, this is my agenda. I've got a vision. I'm going to put it forward. Some things aren't going to work. Some things are going to work. But if we just let the river of life take us downstream, that doesn't work well. And I think that would be my biggest advice, to focus in on some of the things that you want to accomplish, write some legislation that you want to see done, and make sure that you're pushing against the current and not just letting the current take you.
Assuming you're reelected in the fall, do you have any concerns about the conference's ability to, I guess, gel with some of the new members who really took a harsh line against some of the former IDC members in their primary victories? And, you know, do you have any reservations about working with these people, or do you think it's going to be, you know, at the end of the day, Democrats will be able to work with Democrats?
I think Democrats are going to be able to work with Democrats. I think because of the pressures we see outside coming from the Trump administration, the conference is not going to agree on everything. But we're going to have to be disciplined and work together and find common ground and move forward, because the alternative could be disastrous for the people we represent. So I think in this environment, it helps us, it motivates us to say, hey, you know, we might not agree on everything. We might have some differences, but there's more that unites us than divides us. I've met briefly some of the people that have won the primaries.
Who'd you meet?
I think they're hard-working people. Well, we had an event, we had a fundraiser down in the city, and briefly I just got to say hello to some of the candidates that won. Said, look forward to working with you. You know, let's catch up. Let's talk and see how we can work together. And the people I spoke to were receptive to it, and I think we're going to be able to work together well.
Was it awkward at all to rejoin the Democratic Conference and actually sit in there in May when they came back in session?
I mean, for me, it hasn't been awkward. I mean, I've always maintained a relationship with many of the senators. Mm-hmm. There's never been anything personal that I've held grudges. I mean, you know, politics is politics, and we're all working to support the people that we represent. And, you know, you can't take it personal. I never have. So I have a lot of respect for all the senators and all the legislators, because I know what it takes to get there. And it's been I think a smooth transition. I mean, for me, it probably doesn't look like that from the primary results, but the conference, I think the Senate Democrats that are there are willing to say, hey, the past is the past. We've got to move forward. It's a new day. It's a new environment. Let's work together and serve the people of New York.
What's the status of the funds that your campaign received from the Senate Independent Conference Committee, some of the transfers? I know there's been Risa Sugarman raising some concerns, says she's going to bring more issues into court. Does that money need to be returned? Are you waiting for future court decisions? What's the limbo going on there?
Look, there's an appeal going on to find out exactly what needs to be done. And I've said, hey, once the judge decides on what needs to be done, if that money is to be returned, I'm going to comply with that.
Any interest in returning to the Consumer Protection Committee in 2019 if you guys take the majority?
I would love to serve on that committee. We've been able to tackle issues like identity theft and so many other issues. Now I'm the ranker on alcoholism and substance abuse. Those are really my passions, and I think they all relate. When you talk about consumer protection, I mean, a lot of the issues that we're dealing with right now with our opioid epidemic, the fact that we lost over 60,000 Americans last year, is just mind-boggling. And mental illness, addiction, disabilities has been a long passion of mine. When I was 24, I was elected as town clerk in the town of Clarkstown, and one of the responsibilities of town clerk is to sign the death certificates. And so that's something that is really an awesome responsibility, because you have to put your name on that death certificate. And when you're 24 and you're signing a death certificate for someone younger than you, it really hits you. And I started to see the trend over 10 years ago when kids were dying, and I was reading, what the doctor put down about opioid overdoses, and it started to proliferate. And that changes you, and it gives you goosebumps when you sign a death certificate for someone younger than you when you're such a young age. And I've had a real conviction to say we've got to treat addiction for what it is. It's a disease, and still to this day, I'm fighting against the stigma attached with it. So there is so much that we can do. A big part of it starts with the stigma attached to addiction, attached to mental illness, and these are some of the passions that I have, and I think there's a lot of things that we can do, and we can really be leaders in New York, and that's something that I'm really excited to work on in this next legislative session.
Well, Senator, I appreciate you taking some time to talk with me and looking at the past and looking forward, and thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And that's our show. My thanks to Senator Carlucci for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode from an Apple device, please leave us a review. It helps other people discover the podcast and really buoys my self-esteem. One programming note, we will have podcast episodes through the election, and then we're going to take off a few weeks. I'm going to use the break for some audio projects that will hopefully be rolled out in what I'm calling Season 2 of the Capital Confidential podcast. I think you'll enjoy it. Until next time, podcast adjourned.
Probably not too many of my constituents, but
we are huge in East Ramapo.
Yeah, right.
They love us in East Ramapo.